All right. Let's dive deep into mastering our fears today. We're going to be looking at master your fears. And I think it's going to be really cool to look at how language and body awareness and even action can help us kind of break free from fear.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this. It's not about like pretending fear doesn't exist or anything like that. It's about understanding how it all works.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that the book talks about right off the bat is how the words that we use can actually like increase the pressure and make us more afraid. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly like shooting myself. Like I should be working on that project or I have to finish
The
this.
shoulds, I
Yeah.
have to, yeah.
Mm.
It creates this like a feeling of obligation,
Yeah.
right? Like you're trapped.
Yeah.
And so that just makes the fear worse. But what if you took those shoulds and you changed them to coulds? Just a
Hmm.
small little change.
Oh, interesting.
From should to could
Oh.
can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I actually tried that. I had this deadline and it was really stressing me out. And I kept thinking I should be working on this project right now. And the pressure just felt immense. But I consciously changed it to could. And it was like this weight was lifted. I suddenly felt more in control, less overwhelmed.
That's exactly it. It's such a good example of how powerful language can be.
Right.
Instead of feeling like dictated to by these deadlines and pressures, you took ownership of your choice.
Totally. And there's another interesting point the book makes about how using extreme language can actually amplify our fears. Instead of helping us deal with them, sometimes we describe things like, this is terrible, this is catastrophic, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die.
Right. Think about like a genuinely catastrophic event.
Yeah.
People often become silent in those moments. Words almost fail to
Mhm.
like capture what's happening. So if we're using these words in our everyday life for like our everyday fears,
Mhm.
are we blowing things out of proportion?
Totally. I saw this fender bender once, and one of the drivers was like, this is a disaster. My life is over. And honestly, it made the whole situation seem so much worse than it actually was. It was just like a small dent, a little bit of paperwork, you know?
Right. Instead of like helping them cope, those words just magnified the fear
Yeah.
and created unnecessary drama.
Yeah. It makes you really think about how, the words we use kind of shape our reality in a way. And it's
Yeah.
not just about situations, right? It's also how we talk about ourselves. Like the book suggests that instead of saying, I'm a fearful person, you could say, I've been feeling fearful lately.
That's a really good point. It's a subtle shift, but it can make a big difference because
Yeah.
instead of like labeling yourself as inherently fearful, you're recognizing that it's like a temporary state. That opens the door for change and growth. You're not defined by your fears.
Mm.
You're simply experiencing them.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we all have these negative voices in our head, right? The ones that tell us that we're not good enough or we're not brave enough. I know I struggle with those sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you
Mm.
can think of them as like echoes from your past. They might have been relevant at some point in your life, but they don't necessarily define who you are now.
That's so true. So how do we deal with those negative voices?
Well, it takes practice, Bo. The book suggests replacing those voices with a more positive and supportive voice.
Mhm.
And the more you do it, the quieter those negative voices become.
I love that. I mean, can you imagine replacing all those negative thoughts with encouraging supportive ones? That would be a game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about these negative voices and kind of like labeling yourself as a fearful person. But the book also highlights how, like, just calling everything fear isn't always helpful. It actually encourages us to dive deeper and kind of explore the nuances of our fear.
Yeah, explore it more.
Yeah.
Get curious about it.
Yeah, totally. And there's a whole section in the book about questions to ask yourself to help you understand your fear more deeply. Like, how does your fear feel physically? Or what specific thoughts trigger your fear response? And I found it so helpful to kind of sit with these questions and understand my own unique fear patterns. Like, it's not just knowing I'm afraid, but it's more about like understanding the specific things that make me afraid and how that actually feels in my body.
It's about that self-awareness,
Yeah.
right? And that deeper understanding is essential.
Yeah.
So like finding strategies that actually work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've been talking about how like language can affect the way we experience fear. But the book also goes into how our bodies react to fear. And it turns out there are like three main styles: hypersensitive, overreactive, and frozen.
It's so fascinating, right? How differently we can respond to fear. So someone with a hypersensitive style might be really aware of subtle changes in their body,
Yeah.
like a racing heart or a knot in their stomach. They're kind of like a finely tuned instrument, picking up on cues that other people might miss.
Oh, that's totally me. I'm super sensitive to any little change in my body, which can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it feels like my early warning system goes off at the slightest hint of trouble. And then I get caught up in this whole spiral of worry.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And then you have the overreactive style, which is more about a big, intense response. It's like their fight or flight response gets kicked into overdrive.
Yeah.
Then there's the frozen style, where people feel paralyzed or shut down when they're afraid.
Wow, so different.
Yeah,
So the book emphasizes that it's important to pay attention to what your body's telling you, but you don't want to overanalyze every sensation.
right. It's about finding that balance between awareness and overthinking.
Yeah.
Think of your body as like a source of information, not something to be feared or like micromanaged.
I learned this the hard way when I had to give a presentation a while back. I was
Yeah.
so anxious and I was like hyper focused on trying to calm my racing heart and stop my hands from sweating. But all that focus on my body just meant that I totally lost sight of like the actual presentation.
Yeah, you get so caught up in those physical sensations.
Totally. And it was only when I shifted my focus away from my body and back to what I was actually saying that I started to feel more grounded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's this great story in the book about a furniture designer named Jeff who was terrified of public speaking.
Oh yeah, Jeff's story.
But instead of avoiding it, he learned to manage his fear by using breathing exercises to relax his body.
Such a good story.
Breathing exercises are my go-to whenever I feel overwhelmed. Just taking a few deep breaths can really help to reset your nervous system.
It's like hitting the pause button on your fear response.
Yeah.
So you can respond from a place of more clarity and control.
Absolutely. So we've talked about language and our body's response to fear. But what about actually doing something about it? That's where the idea of the self-muscle comes in.
Oh, the self-muscle. I love that concept.
Me too.
It's like working out at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
The more you use your muscles, the stronger they get. And the same goes for confidence and courage. By taking action even when we're afraid, we strengthen our self-muscle.
It's like building up your capacity to face your fears. I used to dread networking events. I'm kind of an introvert. But I pushed myself to go to one a while back and actually ended up having a great time. It was a real self-muscle workout. And I walked out feeling so much more confident in my ability to handle those situations.
That's awesome. And it leads to another key concept, faking it till you make it.
Mm.
It might sound counterintuitive,
Mm-hmm.
but acting confident, even when you don't feel it, can actually help you become more confident over time.
You know what? I used to be terrified of public speaking, but I had this job where I couldn't avoid it, so I decided to fake it.
Good for you.
I stood up tall, made eye contact, projected my voice, even though I felt like a nervous wreck inside.
How did it go?
It actually worked. The more I faked it, the less afraid I felt. Eventually, that pretend confidence transformed into real self-assurance.
That's incredible.
It's like you're tricking your brain into believing it's true.
And remember, you're often your own worst critic. The people around you probably aren't noticing your fears as much as you think they are.
That's so true.
We all have our own insecurities.
Yeah. Speaking of taking action, the book talks about the idea of doing one gutsy thing, or an OGT.
At OGT, I love it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be this huge life-altering thing. It's more about like identifying something you've been avoiding because of fear and just taking that first step, even if it's a small one.
Right, like dipping your toe in the water
Mm.
instead of jumping in the deep end.
Exactly. And the book has some amazing stories about people's OGTs.
Hmm.
Like there's this woman who finally confronted her abusive father after years of silence.
Wow.
Or this guy who was terrified of public speaking, but he volunteered to give a presentation at work.
That's huge.
I know, right?
They're so inspiring. Like they show us that taking even small, courageous actions
Mm.
can create this ripple effect in our lives.
Totally. It's like breaking down this dam of fear, and it
Mhm.
opens up a whole new world of possibilities. So I'm curious, what would you say is like a gutsy thing you've done?
Well, I used to be terrified of flying.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, it was so bad
Yeah.
that I would avoid any opportunity that involved air travel.
Wow.
But I knew I was limiting myself, so I decided to face my fear head on.
Good for you.
I booked a short flight, armed myself with relaxation techniques,
Yeah.
and just took that first step.
That's amazing. How did it go?
It wasn't easy,
Yeah.
but I did it. And you know what? It wasn't nearly as bad as I had imagined. Now I still get a little nervous before flights, but it doesn't control my life anymore.
That's so great to hear.
It really showed me that most of the time.
Mm.
Our fears are way worse in our imagination than they are in reality.
That's so true. So think about something you've been putting off because of fear. It could be anything. Having a difficult conversation, applying for a new job, or even trying a new hobby. What's one small step you could take today to move towards that goal? Write it down, make a plan, and commit to taking action.
That's great advice. Here's a final thought-provoking idea from the book. Think back to your childhood. What children's stories inspired courage or resilience in you? I think those stories often hold this timeless wisdom that we can still draw upon as
Oh,
adults.
that's a good one. You know what? I loved The Little Engine That Could. That whole I think I can mantra, it really stuck with me. It's such a simple idea, but it's so powerful. And it taught me the importance of believing in myself, even when things get tough.
It's amazing how those early stories can shape our beliefs and values. And the book encourages us to revisit those stories and see how their messages might apply to our lives today. Sometimes we just need a little reminder of the strength and resilience that we already have within us.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Master Your Fears, let's recap what we've learned. We explored the power of language and how choosing our words carefully can help us reframe our thoughts and reduce fear. We talked about tuning into our bodies and recognizing the different ways we physically respond to fear without letting those sensations control us. And finally, we discussed the importance of taking action, building our self muscle, and embracing the power of doing one gutsy thing to break free from fear's grip.
Managing fear is not about eliminating it completely. It's about developing the tools and strategies to navigate fear more effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about recognizing that fear is a natural part of life, but doesn't have to define you.
You are braver than you think, stronger than you seem, and more capable than you can imagine. Embrace the possibilities. And don't let fear hold you back from living a life filled with purpose and joy.
That's it for our deep dive into Master Your Fears. Go out there and conquer those fears one gutsy step at a time.